Usually when we talk about a business crisis, there's this expectation of like visible chaos.
Yeah, it's loud. Like the problem is obvious to everyone.
Right. A PR disaster where the stock price plummets, or, the headlines are screaming, the CEO is forced to put out this massive fire that everyone can clearly see.
Exactly. Even if the solution isn't obvious, the crisis itself is it's right there in your face.
But then, you step into the world of enterprise AI adoption right now, and suddenly that chaos is entirely silent.
Utterly silent.
We're looking at this corporate landscape where leaders are just quietly staring at a dashboard of stalled pilot projects. They're wondering why the promised return on investment it just isn't there.
And it's a very lonely feeling for a lot of them.
It really is. So if you're an executive listening to this deep dive right now and you're feeling completely overwhelmed by this wave, looking at your own initiatives and thinking, where's the financial impact? You really need to know you're not alone.
Absolutely not alone.
Today, we are decoding the exact mechanism behind those stalled dashboards. We're pulling from an incredibly insightful thought leadership piece called AI Disruption is Different. It's by Scott Wise from his AI for Leaders program.
It's a great piece.
It really is. And we're backing that up with some dense statistical research that maps out exactly why this specific technology it's breaking all the historical rules.
Yeah, because the data we're looking at here, it paints a picture of a shift that is behaving unlike anything we've studied in, the last 2 centuries.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. And our goal today isn't just to, admire the problem. The goal is to give you the mental reframe you actually need to lead an organization through this. And this is key to understand why the old playbook is failing so spectacularly. We have to look at the sheer velocity of the problem.
Right, because speed completely changes the rules of engagement, doesn't it?
It changes everything.
Like in prior tech cycles, leaders always had this luxury of a wait-and-see approach. You could let the early adopters take all the arrows, right?
Let them find all the bugs.
Exactly. Let them work out the kinks, and then you just casually implement the mature version, 3 years later. But these sources make it very clear that this luxury has just evaporated.
It is entirely gone. I mean, just to put this speed into perspective for a second, let's look at historical adoption curves. The telephone took roughly 50 years to reach 50 million users.
Wow, 50 years.
Yeah. The internet took about 7 years to hit that kind of scale. But ChatGPT, according to the standard analyst estimates, it reached 100 million active users in approximately 2 months.
2 months? I mean, it's...
The fastest consumer technology adoption ever recorded in human history.
2 months is just a staggering number. But I mean, I can already hear the skeptical executive listening to us right now thinking, sure, that's consumer adoption. That's, teenagers doing homework or people writing funny poems. What does that actually mean for my enterprise?
And that is exactly where the Stanford AI Index data shifts the whole perspective, because they specifically track organizational use. In just a single year, from 2023 to 2024, organizational use of AI jumped from 55% to 78%.
That's a massive jump for 1 year.
It's huge. We're seeing generative AI used in at least one business function more than double. But honestly, the sheer volume of adoption isn't even the terrifying part for leaders who are just sitting back and waiting.
So what is the terrifying part?
It's the emergence of this brutal winner-take-most dynamic.
Oh, wow. So if the usage is jumping that fast, I have to imagine the gap between the companies getting it right and the ones, getting it wrong is widening really rapidly.
Widening at a rate we've never seen. The Boston Consulting Group tracked over 1,250 C-level executives across 25 different sectors.
That's a solid sample size.
Yeah, very comprehensive. And they found that right now, only 5% of firms actually qualify as future-built AI leaders. Just 5%.
5%, that's it.
That's it. But those few firms, they are pulling away at light speed. They're seeing 1.7 times the revenue growth and 3.6 times the total shareholder return compared to the laggards in their own industries. And to make matters worse for the companies falling behind, those top 5%, they are outspending the competition on AI by more than 2 to 1.
Yeah.
So they're just compounding their advantage every single quarter.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second because I hear those numbers and I hear the quote from the research, I think it was, hesitation is not neutral anymore, it is erosion.
Right.
But isn't this just like classic tech FOMO? I mean, we heard move fast or die with the dot-com boom. We heard it with the shift to cloud, the shift to mobile. Every software vendor on the planet always tells executives to act now or perish.
Sure they do.
So why is this speed actually lethal to wait out? Why can't a well-capitalized company just let the dust settle, wait 3 years, buy the absolute best AI software off the shelf, and just instantly catch up?
It's a vital question. It really gets to the heart of the misunderstanding here.
Hmm.
The reason you can't just wait and buy your way in later is because of what those top 5% of companies are actually building.
What do you mean?
Well, think back to the cloud migration you mentioned. With the cloud, you were mostly lifting and shifting infrastructure, right? You moved your servers from a physical room in your basement to an Amazon data center.
Right, the plumbing changed, but the house stayed the same.
Exactly. The underlying technology changed, but your fundamental business processes largely stayed the same. The finance team still did finance the exact same way, but these AI leaders, they aren't just buying a software license. They are fundamentally reshaping their actual workflows.
Ah, okay. So they're changing how the work itself gets done.
Yes, they're changing how decisions are made, how client services are delivered, how products are designed. So imagine a competitor who spends 2 years redesigning their entire logistics workflow so that their supply chain managers can make routing decisions, say, 10 times faster and with far greater accuracy.
Right.
If you wait 2 years, you cannot close that gap just by buying the same software license they use. It becomes mathematically impossible to close because they have built this deep organizational muscle that you completely lack.
Man, that is a chilling thought. It's not a software gap, it's an organizational muscle gap.
Precisely.
And if that competitive pressure is so intense, it naturally explains why everyone else is panicking, because the pressure to act is so high, leaders are just rushing to deploy AI, but they're using an outdated playbook, and it's leading to these massive, expensive failures.
They are wrongly comparing AI to an ERP rollout.
Right, like this.
And it gets even more stark. A 2025 MIT project called Project Nanda looked specifically at enterprise generative AI pilots. They found that 95% of those pilots deliver absolutely zero measurable financial impact to the P&L.
95% with zero measurable financial impact.
Zero. They are essentially just highly expensive science experiments.
That is literally billions of dollars just evaporating in corporate budgets. But why? Like, if the technology is as powerful as we just established with those top 5% of companies, why is it failing so spectacularly for everybody else? What is the actual mechanism of that failure?
To understand that failure, we have to look at what BCG calls the 10-20-70 rule. This is a foundational principle they drew from studying hundreds of AI implementations. It states that only 10% of the value of an AI initiative comes from the algorithm itself.
Okay, 10% is the algorithm.
Right. Then 20% comes from the underlying technology and the data readiness. But a massive 70% of the value comes from people and business process change.
So 70% of the equation has literally nothing to do with the code.
Nothing at all. The large language models, they work perfectly well. The failures are organizational. They're a failure to redesign workflows and a failure to manage human behavior.
Give me an example of that. What does that look like on the ground?
Well, consider a frustrated middle manager who is handed a new AI tool to generate quarterly reports, right? The executives bought the license, but they didn't redesign the manager's workflow.
They just said, here, use this.
Exactly. So the manager asks the AI to generate the report. But because the process hasn't changed, the manager doesn't fully trust the output. So they spend 2 hours verifying the AI's numbers, and then, just out of habit and anxiety, they spend another 3 hours doing the work manually anyway, just to be safe.
Oh, wow. Which means the company didn't save any time. They actually doubled the time spent on the task, plus they paid for the software license. That's negative productivity.
And that is exactly why 95% of pilots show zero financial impact. The executives focused entirely on the 30%, the algorithm and the data, and completely ignored the 70%, which is the human being executing the process.
You know, let's visualize this because I think it really highlights the absurdity of the approach. It sounds like a company deciding they want to win a Formula One Grand Prix. So the executives go out and spend millions buying a state-of-the-art Formula One car.
Right, that's the 10% algorithm and 20% tech.
Exactly. But then instead of hiring a professional pit crew and a trained driver, they just drop their regional sales team into the driver's seat. And crucially, they don't change the route. They tell the sales team to drive the Formula One car on their standard suburban commuting route to the office.
Sitting in school zones and stopping at every single red light.
Yes, and then the executives are standing around scratching their heads, wondering why they aren't setting track records. The vehicle is capable of unprecedented speed, but you forced it into a legacy traffic pattern with a driver who doesn't understand the machine. Of course, it yields no financial impact.
You focused entirely on the car, and spent zero time on the track or the driver. And this actually brings us to the core thesis of Scott Wise's article.
Right, the reframe.
Yes, if that old IT playbook of buy the tech and install it is failing, it's because the fundamental nature of this disruption has inverted.
Yeah.
We have to completely change our understanding of what AI is actually automating.
The historical pattern is really fascinating here, because for roughly 200 years, every major wave of technology followed the exact same trajectory, right? Automation targeted physical labor first.
Wow.
The Industrial Revolution mechanized muscle. Machinery displaced farm workers, and those workers moved into factories. Then early computers arrived, and they came for the highly routine, transactional work, you know, bookkeepers, switchboard operators, and again, the workers adapted.
They elevated. For 2 centuries, the resolution to technological disruption was always automate the physical, elevate to the cognitive. Knowledge work, the domain of lawyers, analysts, executive strategists, that was the ultimate safe harbor.
Because it required judgment.
Right. The higher you climbed into complex judgment and expertise, the more insulated you were from the machines.
Until now, Scott Wise calls this the inversion no one saw coming. And the data from Goldman Sachs mapping out this exposure is it's mind-bending.
It completely rewrites the rules of labor economics. In early 2023, Goldman Sachs analyzed AI's exposure across every major profession. Look at the bottom of the list. Construction and extraction work. Only 4 to 6% of tasks are exposed to AI automation.
Wow.
Installation, maintenance, and repair.
Yeah.
4% exposure. The physical trades are incredibly secure.
But then you look at the top of the list, and the floor just drops out. Legal work has 44% of its tasks exposed to AI automation. Office and administrative support is at 46% exposure. Architecture, engineering, business, and financial operations, they're all sitting in the mid-30s.
Yep.
Every prior automation wave moved from the physical up toward the cognitive. This one starts at the very top. Like the article states, it doesn't automate up, it automates in.
The safe harbor is now ground zero. OpenAI published their own research confirming this exact trend. They found that roughly 80% of the U.S. workforce could have at least 10% of their tasks affected by these models.
Hey, 80% of the workforce.
But the critical finding was that higher income, higher education jobs face greater exposure than lower income jobs. McKinsey's research reinforced this as well, noting that generative AI targets activities that currently consume 60 to 70% of employees' time. We aren't talking about automating routine data entry at the margins anymore.
We're talking about core cognitive work.
Exactly.
Wait, so if the traditional safe harbor of cognitive work is exactly where AI operates, and the Goldman Sachs data shows that the ceiling we all used to climb toward is now the floor, what are humans supposed to do? I mean, if there is no up left to move to, where do we go? Do we just surrender the office to the algorithms and hope for the best?
And that is the existential question that is causing so much silent panic in executive suites right now. And the answer is the pivotal concept in Scott Wise's framework. Because there is no up left in the traditional sense, the response cannot be to flee to higher ground. Abdication is not the answer.
So what is?
The response must be integration. We have to move from a mindset of automation to a mindset of amplification.
Automation versus amplification. This really feels like the hinge point of the entire strategy. How does the article define the difference between those two approaches? Because, on the surface, they kind of sound like synonyms for just using technology.
The difference comes down to the fundamental question a leader asks when looking at their operations. Most leaders, the 95% who are failing to see an ROI, they're looking at their org chart and asking, what should we automate?
Okay.
They're looking for tactical cost advantages. They want to remove human effort from a process so they can reduce headcount and save money.
But the leaders who are actually building an advantage, that 5% of future-built organizations, they are asking a completely different question. They're asking, what should we amplify?
Precisely. Automation is about removing the human to create a cost advantage. But tactical cost advantages, they're fleeting. If you automate your customer service to save 10%, your competitors will just buy the same software next month, automate their service, and match your costs. Your advantage just vanishes.
It's a race to the bottom.
Exactly. Amplification, however, is about extending human expertise through the process. It creates strategic differentiation that cannot be easily copied.
So instead of trying to replace the human, you were trying to supercharge the human judgment.
You aim this amplification at the 20% of the work that generates 80% of the impact. The complex judgment calls, the deep client relationships, the nuanced strategic insights. AI is terrible at taking ultimate accountability, but it is incredible at synthesizing massive amounts of unstructured data.
This makes so much sense. I used to hear people say we needed to build an Iron Man suit for workers, but that always felt like a cliche that didn't actually explain how the work changes. Let's look at it like this. Imagine you have a master architect. The automation mindset says, how can I use AI to replace this expensive architect?
Which is foolish.
Right, because the AI doesn't have the architect's taste or their understanding of the client's unspoken desires or, their accountability if the building falls down.
Right. It can't go to jail for a code violation.
Exactly. But the amplification mindset says, I am going to give this master architect a digital team of 1,000 junior draftsmen. The AI instantly draws up the blueprints of whatever the architect envisions. Suddenly, the architect isn't spending 3 weeks rendering one single design. They can test 50 different designs in a single afternoon, adjusting for structural integrity and material costs in real time.
That's a perfect analogy.
The human judgment remains central, but the scale of that judgment becomes staggering.
That is exactly the mechanism of amplification. You are scaling human judgment. And that connects directly back to the BCG data. Those 5% of companies seeing 1.7 times the revenue growth, they aren't getting that growth just by firing people.
Yeah.
You cannot shrink your way to exponential revenue growth.
No, you really can't.
They understand that AI doesn't replace high-level cognitive work. When engaged intentionally, it redefines the reach of that work.
We have covered an immense amount of ground here. We explored the terrifying compounding speed of the adoption curves. We dissected the trap of treating this like a massive ERP rollout where the 70% of human change is just ignored.
Yep.
We examined the historical inversion where cognitive work is now the target, and we laid out the vital shift from tactical automation to strategic amplification. But, we always want to ensure this is practically actionable. If you are a corporate leader listening to this, how do you apply this on Monday morning? What is the specific shift you need to make this week?
The very first thing you must do is shift your executive focus from technology readiness to human readiness. The sources are abundantly clear on this. Finding the right technology is no longer the hard part. Guiding the human transition is the hard part.
So practically speaking, if you're listening to this on your commute, your goal on Monday morning is not to evaluate another large language model vendor. It isn't to sit through, another software demo looking for a magic bullet.
Your goal is to audit your current AI initiatives through the lens of that 10-20-70 rule. Look at the budgets, the timelines, and the executive energy dedicated to your pilot projects. Are you dedicating 70% of those resources to redesigning workflows and upskilling your teams? Or are you just buying licenses and hoping your staff miraculously figures out how to evolve on their own?
It's about getting granular with the process. Like on Monday, sit down with a key team and ask them to map out their week. Find the single task that requires the most complex strategic human judgment, that 20% that drives the real value.
Find the bottleneck.
Right. Then, instead of sprinkling AI across the entire department to shave off 5 minutes of email drafting, take 100% of your AI budget and build a custom workflow specifically to amplify that one strategic bottleneck. Clear the suburban traffic off the track so the Formula One car can actually drive.
That is the human readiness conversation. You were asking, if you had an assistant that had read every document ever produced by this company and could synthesize it instantly, how would you fundamentally change the way you interact with our clients? You cannot just layer AI onto legacy processes and expect transformation. You have to design the work around the amplification.
And that is the intentional design that separates the 5% of future-built leaders from the 95% who are just bleeding budget on stalled pilots.
Wow.
To dig deeper into this exact roadmap and to figure out how to move your specific team from just being AI curious to truly AI capable, you really need to check out more of the AI for Leaders content at scottwise.ai. It is an absolute goldmine for navigating the nuances of this specific organizational transition.
The transition from managing technology implementation to managing human adaptation is, without question, the most critical leadership challenge of this decade.
So to bring us all the way back to the beginning, we started by talking about that silent crisis. The executive sitting alone, staring at a dashboard of stalled projects, waiting for a financial impact that never arrives. If you take the core reframe from Scott Wise's research to heart, you stop staring at the dashboard and you start redesigning the engine of how your people work. But we want to leave you with a final thought to really chew on as you head into your week.
Think about the absolute best, most strategic thinker in your organization right now. The person whose judgment you trust implicitly to drive the business forward. If an AI amplification workflow allowed them to execute their judgment at 10 times their current scale tomorrow, would your current organizational structure even survive the impact?